Hello and welcome back to DNS Basics. My name is David Young and today is the finale of our series on DNS, the phone book of the internet. Today we'll be talking about security, but before we start, please, if you've enjoyed this series, make sure to like and subscribe, and as always, feel free to leave a comment with any questions you have. Thank you, and let's get into it. So DNS is absolutely crucial to the proper functioning of the internet, as we've established throughout this series. Every internet user uses this process, and organizations like Amazon.com, for instance, rely on DNS to allow people to access their websites. Without DNS, they would effectively be offline. And so DNS is extremely important, and that makes it a target for hackers. And so we're going to look at a few of the types of cyber attacks that we see on DNS and DNS related entities. So one type of cyber attack that utilizes the DNS protocol is called DNS spoofing. And it's similar to IP spoofing, which we've talked about before in the Intro to Computer Networking series, part 5. But what happens is that a hacker intercepts a DNS query and generates a response that appears to be a response from a DNS server, but is in fact fraudulent, and it directs the client to a false IP address for the host name that was queried. And from that point, the client will get information from that host that is fraudulent, for instance, a fake version of the website that they were trying to reach. And there might be phishing going on, trying to obtain passwords from that user. There might be malware downloads happening from that IP address. And so DNS spoofing takes advantage of the protocol of DNS to misdirect users. A similar attack to DNS spoofing is called cache poisoning. It's where a hacker will inject a fraudulent response record into a local DNS cache, and then any clients that try to access the host name associated with that fraudulent response record will have the fraudulent response record returned to them, and then they'll end up going to an IP address that is not the actual authoritative IP address for that host name. And so the same problems as with DNS spoofing apply here. A user is going to end up going to the wrong website or the wrong host and become vulnerable to cyber attacks. And the final type of DNS attack that we're going to talk about here would be a distributed denial of service attack. We've once again talked about this before in part 5 of the Intro to Computer Networking series, but it's basically when a hacker utilizes what's called a botnet, which is a group of computers which the hacker has seized control of through malware to send a bunch of packets to a DNS server or any type of server and flood it, overwhelming it and blocking it off for use to legitimate traffic because it's so overwhelmed by illegitimate traffic. And so DDoS attack on a DNS root server has never been successfully executed, but even if it were to be, local DNS caches store the locations of top-level domain servers sometimes, or even authoritative DNS servers, meaning that were one component to be taken down, whether that's a top-level domain server or a root server, the client may still be able to get to the website they're searching for. But if a hacker were, for instance, to DDoS Amazon.com's ADNS server successfully, they could hold Amazon hostage and basically extort them from that point. So some countermeasures to DDoS attacks are the distributed nature of DNS. There's no single point of failure that a hacker could target, and there's backups in case something gets taken offline, and also traffic filtering, which prevents excessive traffic from a particular source. A very important security measure that's enacted on DNS is called DNS SEC. It's the DNS security extension, and it's an add-on to the DNS protocol to provide message authentication from for DNS responses. So what happens is that when a DNS server generates a response, it cryptographically adds what's called a digital signature to responses, which means it encrypts it in a way that only it knows how to do, and clients can then decrypt that response um, and verify that because they were able to decrypt it, it was in fact encrypted with an authentic digital signature. And so any fraudulent DNS responses will not be able to replicate this digital signature and thus will show themselves to be fraudulent. And any tampering with a DNS response while it's in transit, any attempt to change the value of a field in a response record will make the DNS response undecryptable because it'll have messed up the cipher text and therefore will become uh, meaningless when it's deciphered. And so DNS SEC primarily protects against DNS spoofing and cache poisoning by determining that any DNS responses that arrive at some DNS server or client are actually authentic and not being injected or spoofed. Thank you so much for joining us for the DNS Basics series. It's been such a tremendous opportunity to look at what the basics of DNS are and understand this vital process for the internet. Please comment any questions that you've had about this, and please don't forget, if you enjoyed this series, to like and subscribe. Thank you, and God bless.